Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Shaun Joughin. I'm the Pre-Sales Director of ICRON. We're going to talk, or I'm going to talk anyway. We can talk a little bit later if you're interested in this subject, on risk, missing ingredient of sales and operations planning. This is something that we see quite regularly, that is, people have got a certain nervousness about talking about risk because they can't really quantify it. So what we do within our software is we actually try and quantify this to enable discussions to take place, to be able to enable that S&OP process to have a better adoption, supported by the tool set. So who are ICRON? ICRON, we produce software. We're a software platform, one organic software platform that covers a number of different optimized decision processes across a diverse range of industries. So going back to this was a slide from our presentation that we gave this time last year on decision intelligence. And the ICRON software is all about making better decisions using decision intelligence. And we're looking at what is the actual decisions that we're making. So this is actually when you're actually making a decision, it's not just making a choice. It's actually saying, okay, I'm going to commit something. I'm going to commit time, resources, your people, to actually do something. And it's something that could be costly to change later. So it's when you've actually made a decision around something. And we're using decision intelligence as the actual process to actually determine this. So how to actually make these decisions in an automated way. And one of those elements that we take into account there is the risk and uncertainty around making decisions. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. So what type of risks do we have? That's something that there's a lot of things we don't actually really talk about in a whole lot of detail. A lot of hidden risks. There's risks around the internal risks, external risks, things which are external to the company that are playing on into the markets. But there's a likelihood of these sort of things happening, problems that could occur. So this could come from suppliers, it could come from resources, it could come from markets, it could come from events, conflicts, wars, shortages, all of these type of things which cause risk. There's a risk appetite. So this is how much risk that you are prepared to take as an individual and within a group, the organization that you work with, how that risk appetite works within that company as well. So that risk appetite can take a number of different flavors, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. And then opportunity, this comes tied up with the risks. So whenever you've got a risk, there's also, on the flip side of it, there's a way that you can actually exploit that from an opportunistic point of view. Some people would look at that picture there and say, this is really, really cool. This is the ultimate sort of Instagram picture that I want to have. But actually, if you do a sort of an optimization without taking risk into account, you can end up in some of these very, very scary places, which is sort of standing up in a balanced position. Most companies want to try and get to a place where they're actually at the top of the game, they're ahead of the competition, they're right on the edge, they've got perfect visibility, they're in a balanced position, arguably a little bit of a scary one, and they're built on a foundation which is quite solid. But we've got to question whether that foundation is actually quite solid and whether we're actually taking a real big risk going up there and having what I would call the perfectly unacceptable plan, because most companies don't want to be there. So should we actually go there at all? So in terms of risk as well, you also have when we have conflicts. So we have two different things which are necessarily competing, often more different things. So I'm going to pose you a question about what you would rather take on from a risk point of view. Okay, so we've got a very large duck. Would you rather defend yourself? And this is coming into, you may think this is a bit obscure and a bit abstract, something that you know about, but it's in a market which it's behaving slightly differently. Or would you rather defend yourself against something much smaller that's been shrunk? And this is something else. You're familiar with it, but you don't know how it's going to behave. I can see at the moment people are already thinking, We're already getting into their mind which one they'd rather fight against. And this is like taking a new product to market in a market that you're not quite familiar with. How this product's going to behave in this particular market. What are the risks associated with doing that? I'm missing a slide. There we go. And also we have competing objectives when we're actually looking at that. So what are we actually trying to do? When we're actually taking on that battle, within the organization, we're trying to take on delivery performance versus resource utilization. Depends on who you look at within that organization and who's actually taking those decisions. They've got different fears. So different fears in terms of whether you're going to upset your customer. Fears of whether you've got actual maximum productivity through your factories. And people have got conflicts there. But we don't talk about these type of things in terms of the different risks and quantifying these against how much are we actually disappointing our customers versus how much throughput we're not getting. I don't know if anyone's got any opinions in terms of whether they'd go against the big duck or the small horses. There's a bit of this sort of roulette thing that we were talking about earlier. So, coming back down to more of the supply chain elements of it. Risk profiles. So how much of a risk is your organization prepared to take? And at what point in time are they prepared to take this? So depending on the market, you might want to take more or less of a risk in certain areas. So we're talking here capacity risks. So do you fully utilize your resources with really high priority orders? Yeah, because if you're putting a lot of high priority orders through a resource or a factory at a particular point in time, and you take the reliability of that factory into account, yeah, you're taking quite a risk by doing all of those things at the same time. Should you postpone some of them, do it a little bit later with a little bit more certainty? Material risk. Should you keep more safety stock into account? Yeah? So this buffers your ability to be able to provide customer deliveries. Or should you actually look at lead times and confirm things earlier or later? So high risk, you're being a little bit bolder in terms of the way that you're working. Lower risk, you're being a little bit more conservative in terms of how you're going to play things. And what we're going to talk about now is the ability to do scenario. Oh, come on, click. Play scenarios. We're regularly looking, and this is what we do within ICRON, is the ability to just take the current plan that you're working with and plan in different ways. So, as in like you're a DJ deck, a music producer, you're sliding the various different elements of the controls up and down to say, I'd like a little bit more or a little bit less risk in this area. I'd like to play my risk against my costs, to say, okay, I'd like to see if I can minimize my costs, but pull less risk into this. What does my scenario look like? So what ICRON does is it allows us to actually create a number of different scenarios very, very quickly and easily, and to be able to create the right balance within the organization, to actually then try these various different scenarios. With this breeds resilience, because you're actually trying things out. You're looking down different roads. You're saying, okay, what happens if we go down there and we're very, very bold in our strategy? We're going to market down there, and we're going to use these particular suppliers. They might be a bit risky, but we're taking that into account in terms of our planning. Okay? Visualizing risk. Yes, we visualize in a number of different tools. We visualize the way in which we're looking at lateness. So that's revenue risk. But here we're looking at the actual risk on particular resources. We're looking at risk on particular factories. We're looking at risk that we're placing on particular suppliers. And we're visualizing those so that you can actually then take decisions around those. Visualizing them in a way that you can see the trends. You can see the impact using color coding to actually say, hey, this is where you should focus. So I mentioned earlier a little bit more about resilience. So the proactive nature, generating lots and lots of scenarios with various different risk profiles to actually say, well, what sort of sensitivity have I got to the risk in terms of going down these various different routes? So this allows you to be proactive. in terms of looking and saying, well, hey, if we go that way, and looking down all these different routes, you can create a number of these scenarios offline as well, so you can have the computer system think for you outside of this. There's nothing to say that using AI technology and things like that now that you can actually then pull in and say, right, okay, let's run these scenarios offline and let's work out which ones are the best ones to use. Yep, so some of them you might already being a little bit resilient and thinking how you're actually going to handle that big duck at the moment that we were talking about. So you're a little bit more resilient than you were 10 minutes ago when I started this conversation. Then you've got responsiveness. This is how you then move in, and this is using the same platform, using the ICRON platform, to actually then respond automatically to things which actually occur in reality. So you've got disturbances that take place and you need to respond to them, and you need to do automated decisions around that. So ICRON enables, this is a risk point of view, there's a number of other different elements of this. So we're just really focusing at the moment on the risk aspects of it. So it's to include your risk appetite in your planning. So actually run plans with different approaches, different ways, saying I want to go into this market in a bold manner, I want to go into this market in a more conservative manner. And then aligning your risk profile with your actual performance that you're actually going to deliver against. And then coupling up with the opportunity to potentially say, well, okay, well, I could negotiate a little bit earlier delivery with a particular customer if I see the opportunity when I've done my risk analysis. So you're actually then looking and saying, well, okay, well, how can I do things a little bit better, as well when taking a certain risk profile into account. The thing that we're not talking about here a lot of the time is we're not talking about risk profiles. We're not talking about how much risk we want to take as a company. And that's really where we want to, that the adoption of S&OP is very, very much hinged on that, because we just don't talk about it. We produce good plans, but we don't talk about how much risk there is in those plans. So the technology behind this is very, very quick. It kind of ticks the artificial intelligence box. We're using this in a number of different areas. We're using this in the optimization algorithms. I'm getting attacked. We're using it within the data analysis to try and predict how the data's, how things are changing. So within that decision-making process, the whole AI box is ticked. Okay. Anyone know how these two things are related? Okay, so to build risk management into your decision-making processes is something that generally takes quite a while if you really, really want to get to a master level of this. And they say to actually become a master at doing something, you actually have to spend about 10,000 hours on doing it. Actually, it's been proven that if you spend 100 hours a year on something, you actually get to become better than 95% of your population at being able to do that particular process. That's 18 minutes a day. Is that a big amount of time to be talking about risk management within your company to actually improve your S&OP process? It's not very long, and it gets you to quite a level quite quickly. So if you want to talk a little bit more about risk management, about how you can get into the top 95% of the population around here, come and talk to us outside. And now that, I'll leave you. Thank you very much for your time.